This is the 8th in our series of videos about building a website. In this video we're going to consider how we can improve the menu. So far we've planned out what we require and we've kept it stupidly simple. We've produced a first build making a clear separation between the HTML and the CSS. We've created a single template for our default page, and we've made our site responsive and legacy and cross-browser compatible. Now we can improve the way that we've done the menu in what we've done so far. There are three things that we can do. First of all, we can use something called an ini file, and this can make things a lot less error prone in the way that we build our menus. Secondly, we can use $server as the variable that automatically can help us identify the active menu selection in our menu. And thirdly, there's something called Recursion, which is a neat trick that coders like to use for dealing with complex situations and making them much simpler. We can do this for our menus. Particularly it helps if we have things like submenus to deal with. Now that's an awful lot for one video, so what we're going to do is in this video we'll cover just the generation of the semantic menu structure, and we'll save the way in which we actually lay it out in our website, in our CSS, for next time. So first of all, let's look at how we can use this ini file thing. Now PHP provides an ini file facility, and that's a separate file. It's a text file like just about everything else we do in our web development, if we're using our PHP and CSS and so on as an approach. It's a separate file that can be read in, containing a set of name pointing to value pairs. Now we've been building aging surfers, but our approach is a bit sneaky actually. What we've actually got is a mini framework which we could use in a variety of different situations fairly straightforwardly to produce just about any website we like, so long as it's to the same sort of requirements. Now we can use our ini file to really make it reusable. So in our ini file we can have all the different values for things like the website title heading, the tagline as I would like to call it. So our heading is Aging Surfers on each page, our tagline is Growing Old Disgracefully, and we can change all of this standard stuff on our standard page template just in the ini file. It makes it really easy to get at and really accessible and very easy to change for a different website. However, our ini file doesn't just have to contain name pointing to value pairs, it can also contain an array of name pointing to value pairs, and this will be brilliant for our menus. So let's look at our ini file first. Our ini file could look like this. So we've got our different values in here, but we can also specify our menu, as you can see at the end here. And specifying our menu in this way is just so much easier than writing out a whole load of ahref lines by hand. The problem with the ahref lines is you've got the page name and the URL that you've got to feed into the middle of these ahref lines, and there's inverted commas and all sorts of other things involved in that, and it's so easy just to make simple mistakes, typing errors, simple coding mistakes, and it's much more difficult to see in that context. If you have the menu entries recorded as in this ini file, it's so much easier to see and so much easier to tidy up any mistakes that might be there. Now, okay, we've created our ini file, but what about reading our ini file? Well, we can read in our ini file when we instantiate our web page class. So we just use a simple read ini file command, and it might be useful as we're pulling in these ini file values in our double underline construct method in our class. It might be useful if we can create also some class attributes to hold the values until we need them. Now actually, again, I've been a little bit sneaky here in the previous videos. We just mentioned in passing that when we set up our stream method for our class, that we could, rather than just have an insertion for our our tab title on our pages, we could actually make space for an array of substitutions with some vague idea that we might need them later. This is where we need them. So we've got all our different substitutions that we can plug in, and we just put them into our array of substitutions when we're doing the streaming. Now we also need to do this for the menu, but for the menu of course we need to build that up line by line. A for each statement is good for this in PHP, so we can just iterate through. So for each of the menu entries in our array, we can pull them up and put them into an ahref line that we build up automatically now. But we can also use the $server thing in PHP to make sure that we identify the active menu option. There's a little bit of PHP magic going on here as well, because $server for self pulls up the entire URL for the page we're on. We just want the actual page name, so there's a little bit of string handling going on to remove the path to that page and just leave us with, for example, index.php or contact.php or whatever it is that we're looking at for our menu option in here. And as we're doing that, now we know which page we're on, we can do a match and say if the line that we're putting into our menu is the same as the page that we're on, then we can tag it with a suitable class so that our CSS can display it differently. We're not going to actually do that in this video, as we said earlier. We're just noting that we've put the tag in there, and then in the next video we'll look at what we do just to make the changes. Okay, so far we've used our ini file, we've built up the menu, and we've used $server to catch the current page that we can tag it as being the active page in our menu. And this is actually all we need to do for our Aging Surfers website, where we've just got a flat level menu with a few entries. But in general, we might want to have a submenu, and if we should need submenus, then that's going to require extra code in the way we've handled it here. And that's sort of all right, but it's starting to get more complicated, and should we ever need submenus, heaven forbid, then it will all become rather complicated. But there's something that computer scientists love to use, which can make life really simple again, and it's a concept called recursion. So let's have a look at how this recursive magic works. So to come up with a recursive approach to building up a menu, we need first of all to separate our menu coding into a separate method, and we'll call it build menu for the sake of calling it something, and we'll pass it an array containing the name pointing to URL pairs in our menu structure. In other words, just the straight array straight out of our ini file. We'll now use our for each statement to pass over the array and to create the various href lines as we did before, but now suppose we come to one of these entries which is itself an array rather than a straight entry. That means it's a submenu. So all we need to do is to build a menu with a submenu. So we call build menu from within build menu, that's the recursive idea, and we pass it the submenu array. So that creates the submenu, and then it returns to the build menu it came from and finishes off building the menu HTML text that we're creating for our outer menu. And actually, this approach not only works for submenus, but it also works for sub-submenus and sub-submenus, whatever we want. We can go on forever. We won't need to go to any depth like that. But the point is we've solved the problem once and for all, and we now don't have to worry about how we actually code it up. There's no more coding to add in our PHP. It's all done just through the simple idea of recursion. Isn't that beautiful? So we now have a neat and tidy way of creating the necessary menu HTML for our website. The last thing we need to do now is to sort out our CSS file. We need to be able to sort out our active menu entry. We need to sort out the displaying of submenus if we need them, and there's something else we haven't tackled so far, which is how are we going to do our menus for mobile display. So far our menus are short enough and our menu entries are short enough that we've got away with just doing an ordinary version of the big option of our menu. But typically when we get to mobile display we need something a little different. We'll think about that next time.